morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Dr. Jason Bolton. I'm the Vice President of Community Partnerships and Admissions for the Help Group, and I am obviously wearing my admissions hat for today to talk about our schools here at the Help Group. I would like to give you a clear agenda for what we're going to cover. That was sort of the introduction, so we've done that. I might do a little bit more on that here in a minute. We're going to talk about what a non-public school is. We're going to talk about funding for that. How do you apply to our programs? I'll describe the 15 schools that we operate. And then we'll leave some time for questions. When you all registered for this open house today, you had the opportunity to submit some questions in advance. And I looked over those questions before we came on live, and all of them are going to be answered in this webcast. So feel free to ask other questions. You can use the chat button at the bottom of your page. Throughout, I'll look through and see if there are chats coming up that I should address in the middle of the presentation. If I don't, it's probably because I think that we're going to get there anyway. And then I'll just keep monitoring it so that, you know, at the end when we have a little bit of time to address more questions, I can take those then. Okay. I did say a little bit about myself in terms of my name and my title. I do like I've been at the Help Group for 20 years. Actually, next month is my 20th anniversary. And I've been doing these open houses for 14 or 15 of those 20 years. And I do like to talk a little bit about what I bring to talking about our programs. Sometimes I feel a little bit like the old commercial of the guy who was the CEO of the hair club for men, because not only do I work here, but my daughter was also a student in one of our programs. So she went to our preschool for about a year and a half, our Young Learners Preschool. And then after that, she went back to public school, and she just started 9th grade this year. But I have been through the same process as a parent that many of you are in right now, in looking for the right program to fit your students' needs, and looking all over for what is the best one. I was lucky to find the best program for my child in the same building where I worked. And so I bring that perspective of not only being a professional in this space, but also being a parent who was a consumer of these same types of services. If you don't know about the Help Group, some of you may not. I did notice there are a couple of folks from out of the LA area who are on the webcast today. So let me just tell you briefly a little bit about the Help Group. You can read the slide that's up on the screen. But we're a large agency. We operate 15 non-public schools, but we do some other things as well. We have a mental health contract where we have an outpatient program to provide mental health services, both in clinic and in people's homes. You see there the number of other services that we provide. We have residential programs. We have an adolescent residential program. We have an adult residential program. We have a coaching program called Advance LA. We have a program called Kaleidoscope that serves the needs of the LGBTQ community. We do after-school enrichment and parent education. So if you want to find out more about all of those programs, if you go to www.thehelpgroup.org, you can scroll around and find out all the things that they do. You can always also email me at any time. So my email is my first initial and last name, so jbolton@thehelpgroup.org. You can also email admissions@thehelpgroup.org. And we'll always try to answer your questions about our schools or any of the other programs that we operate. Um, you guys here, though, are here to talk about trying to find a good school a placement for your child. And I mentioned earlier that we operate 15 non-public schools. And in a second, I'll get into what exactly a non-public school is. It's kind of an odd terminology there. But I first want to talk a little bit about why we have 15 schools. Why don't we have one big school, or maybe a couple, maybe 2 or 3 in different locations? And what we have decided is in the best interests of the students that we serve is to serve like students together, so that we can provide a specialized program that really focuses on those unique but similar qualities, strengths, characteristics, deficits that students may bring to their educational needs. So we have schools that focus on autism. We have schools that focus on kids with social and emotional challenges. We have schools that focus on kids with learning disabilities. So we have chosen to do that with these specific schools that we can bring like students together, okay? All right, so let's talk about this term, non-public school. If you're from other areas of the country, that might really seem like an odd title. So non-public, we're not public and we're not quite private. Then technically we are a private school. We file an affidavit with the state every year as a private school. But what makes us non-public is that the majority of our students, over 95% of our students, are funded to attend our schools by their local school district, okay? So we have over 1,100 students across those 15 schools. And like I said, more than 95% their school district funds them to attend our schools. That leaves a handful of students who are in our different schools whose parents pay privately. So we do have a tuition rate for folks who would rather pay privately. But again, that is the overwhelming minority of students. The purpose of a non-public school then is to help districts extend their ability to provide services to any individual student. So if a school district doesn't have a program that best fits the needs of the particular student, then they may be willing to look at a non-public school to refer that child to, so that they can benefit from their curriculum. That means that those students remain a student of that district. We are contracted to be the providers of special education for that student, but the student remains a student of that district. So let's say you live within the boundaries of the Los Angeles Unified School District, and you're funded to attend one of our schools. Your student remains an LAUSD student. You continue to have IEPs on an annual basis, or more often if the IEP team, you or the IEP team, think it's necessary. And LAUSD continues to hold those IEPs. They hold them on site at our schools for the most part. And of course, we are present. Our administration is present. Our teachers are present. Our service providers are present. But LAUSD runs the meeting, and it continues to be an LAUSD IEP. And that is the same for any district that refers students to us and places students with us. I noticed that I keep using the word district. If any of you have children who are in an independent charter school, independent charter schools work just like a district does. So charter schools also refer to us and maintain their student and continue to do IEPs as their student is with us. We provide a whole host of services that children need in order to benefit from their curriculum or access their curriculum. So these services are the same services that are typically on an IEP. So we have our own occupational therapists. We have our own speech therapists. There are certain times when a student might need adult assistance, and we provide that as well. and we provide transportation. Transportation is seen as a related service, and most students who attend our schools are also funded for transportation. I'll say a little bit about that I wouldn't usually say in this presentation, but if you guys are watching the news, you may notice that there are transportation bus driver shortages all across the country, and we are not immune to that issue also. While we do provide transportation for the majority of our students, we have made a campaign this year to encourage parents to provide their own transportation, and we reimburse for mileage. It has really helped our system out. For any parent who's able to do that, to be able to do that has really helped our system out. We have gotten a little bit better since school started with being able to get more drivers, but it continues to be a problem for us. Just want to remind folks that you can use the chat button below if anything comes to mind for you, or you want any specific question answered, and I'll be happy to do that either during the presentation or as we get to the end. That section that I just went over, I think it answered quite a few of the pre-populated questions that you guys asked at the, when you registered. So hopefully that was helpful to you. So let's move to, how does funding work? So I said multiple times in the earlier section that children are funded by their district, or you know, how kids get here is because districts fund them. And there really is a step before that, and that is that an IEP team needs to determine that a non-public school is your child's least restrictive and most appropriate educational environment. So if a school district feels like they have a program that suits your child's needs, then they're likely to offer that program. It is when they think that they don't have a program that meets your child's needs that they may consider a non-public school. So there's really two routes that determination may be made, and then the funding follows that. So the first route, and the easiest one, is that you have that IEP. You express your concern to the school district that you don't think they have a program that's meeting your child's needs, and the IEP team agrees with you. Maybe not immediately, but during that process, they end up agreeing with you, and they grant a non-public school placement for your child. They then will give you referrals to non-public schools, which most likely will include us, and will definitely include us if it's something that you tell them that you want. And then you go and look at those programs, and you decide which one may be best suited for your child. So that's the easiest way. You go to an IEP, the IEP team agrees, they recommend a placement in a non-public school in the IEP, and then the funding follows, and your child goes through the enrollment process with us, which the application and enrollment process I will talk about next. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes you remain convinced that the school district doesn't have an appropriate placement, and they remain convinced that they do. And just like you have the right as a parent to agree or disagree with any aspect of an IEP, you have that same right to disagree with their offer of placement. So you could agree with everything else in the IEP. You could agree with the goals, you could agree with the services, but you could disagree with placement. And you do that right there at the IEP. When that happens, then you have the right to proceed with certain due process steps, and those can lead to either informal dispute resolution with the school district or mediation with the school district, in which you try to come to an agreement about the best placement for your child. And in this case, the context in which we're talking today, that would be non-public school. So let's say you went to the IEP, there was a disagreement, you decided that you wanted to to disagree with that IEP for placement, and then you go through this process, you may then be granted non-public school placement through mediation or through an informal dispute resolution meeting with the school district. And in those cases, same thing happens. The funding will follow. At the help group, we are okay with, and again, like I said, I will go through the enrollment process here in a minute, the application enrollment process in a minute. But we are okay with meeting you and your child and starting the application process, even if you are not yet funded. So let's say you don't have the ability to pay privately and you think that your child would benefit from a school like ours, but you haven't gotten that indication at all from the school district yet. We will still start the process with you. And if we finish that process with you prior to your getting funded, prior to your child being funded for one of our schools, and we find your child appropriate for one of our schools, we will send you a letter. Well, we'll tell you first, but we will send you a documentation and a letter that says that your child is acceptable, but not yet accepted. And that just means that when funding does happen, when you're able to ascertain that funding, then we will automatically transfer your status to an accepted status. Some folks take that letter, that what we call A but A letter, acceptable but not accepted, an A but A letter. Some folks take that to the district and say, look, the help group thinks that Bridgeport is an appropriate placement for their child. The district may say, that's nice that the help group thinks that, but let's talk about what really is the appropriate placement. Let's make sure that's the least restrictive and most appropriate placement for your child. Because really what we're saying is just that we find them to be a good fit for our program. We are not the IEP team, and we can't make that determination that your child needs a non-public school to access their curriculum. Only the IEP team can do that. So if you come to us prior to being funded, then we would, and we find your child to be a good fit, then we would give you one of those letters that says that you are, your child is acceptable but not yet accepted. Then, of course, if you come to us, if some of you who are here right now are already funded for a non-public school, and we find that you are your child is a good fit for one of our schools, then of course that makes it much easier. Once we say yes to that, then we just go through the enrollment process and we get things moving as quickly as we possibly can. So that leads us to how exactly do you apply for our programs? We do still have paper applications available. You can find them on our website at www.thehelpgroup.org. You can email admissions@thehelpgroup.org and they can send you a paper application. But our preference is to use our online application, which is there you can find multiple links to it on our website. And again, if you can't find those, you can always email admissions@thehelpgroup.org and we can help you find the links to that. It does require that you quickly make a profile in an application called PowerSchool. And once you do that, then it's pretty simple. You just have to put in a few pieces of information to set up that account, and then you're able to submit your application online to us. Once we get that the little notice from PowerSchool that someone has completed an application online, then the admissions office and it's someone named Christina or someone named Trish will call you to set up an interview for you and your child. After participating in this open house, you may get a good understanding of exactly which of our schools your child should apply to. You may also leave this open house. I hope not. I hope you have a really good understanding of which one. But you may also go and leave this open house a little bit hesitant about whether it should be this school or this school or this school. And I just want to alleviate some anxiety about that, because when you apply to one of our schools, you're essentially applying to all of our schools. So if you say, I want my child to attend STEM Cubed Academy, and you send in an application to us, we will first consider your child for that school. We will honor your wishes and first look at them for that school. And at the same time, we will look at them for all of our schools. So don't feel like, oh no, I better get this right, or else I'm going to wait to apply until I'm sure I get this right. You don't really need to feel that. At the same time, if a district is referring if a district gives you a letter with a list of schools that you should look at for your child, and it's not one of the schools, one of our schools that you wished it would have been, again, not a problem. Our agreement that we have with school districts, including LAUSD, is that if they refer to one of our schools, they are also, in essence, referring to any of our schools. So we can always adapt that and make that change midstream. When you come for an interview, you will meet with an administrator of one of our schools. And right now, a lot of these interviews are still being done on Zoom, which is actually very convenient for a lot of people. You know, there are things that we are going to learn about moving forward that came from the pandemic that are still good practices to keep going afterwards. So many of them are still that. We are having, from time to time, we are having some in-person interviews as well. But many parents right now are preferring also to do these interviews virtually. So our administrator will meet with you. It's usually about an hour. Sometimes it doesn't take quite that long. They talk with you. They talk with your child. Sometimes they may ask to speak just with you, and sometimes they may ask to speak just with your child. And really get a good sense of strengths and challenges and school history, on why you think that non-public school is necessary at this point, and what you're looking for in a non-public school, while also evaluating to some degree how good of a fit that your child is with the program during that interview. Now, evaluating that fit, the interview is one piece of that. We're also looking at your school records, which you'll be asked to supply with the application. We're looking at that. We're looking at old IEPs, or if it's a new IEP, the funding IEP, we're looking at that. We're looking at school history. We're looking at any assessments that you have, that your child has had over the years, with an emphasis on the newer ones. And all of that gives us a picture about whether we have a good fit between our school and your child. The last piece of information that we collect during the evaluation process is collateral information. So we ask that you give us 2 or 3 basically references from professionals who know your child well. At this stage in the year, we're about a quarter into the school year. We would prefer that one of those be the current classroom teacher. Earlier in the year, that was a little bit more difficult because classroom teachers didn't know the kids well yet, and we had to get more creative about getting collateral information. But right now, the current classroom teacher is recommended. And then maybe you have a service provider, you have an OT or a speech therapist or a counselor, or the vice principal might know your child well, those kinds of folks. It could be an outside provider as well. We often are talking with developmental pediatricians, psychiatrists, in order to get that information as well. Okay, so through all of that, through the application material, through the evaluation, through the review of the records, through the discussion with the collateral information, we will determine whether we have a good fit with the school that you applied to or were referred to, or if we have another school that we think may be a better fit. So the last thing on this slide is possible outcomes and next steps. So this is what can happen from that process. Best case scenario is you apply to Sunrise. We think Sunrise is the good fit, and we communicate that to you. You're already funded, and we start talking about getting an IEP done to offer us as placement, and so that you can start as soon as possible. Another scenario is that even though we've done all of those things that we just talked about, we still don't have a real clear idea of whether that's an appropriate place. And we ask your child to come in for maybe a 2-day visit in the classroom. That becomes part of the evaluation, and it just helps us determine, again, the fit. So after the evaluation, you may hear, you know what, we'd like your child to come in for a 2-day visit and be a part of the class and see what the routine is like, so that we can add that to our evaluation process. Okay, so that may happen. Third thing that may happen is we may decide that you applied to Sunrise, but Bridgeport is perhaps a better option. And so we will ask that you do a second interview with Bridgeport. Now, there's parts of that you won't have to do again, like the collateral information doesn't have to be redone. You don't have to submit anything new, but you are going to now meet with the administration at Bridgeport so that they can add to the evaluation and determine if that second school is a more appropriate school for your student. And then lastly, there are a minority of students that we just feel that we don't have a good fit for. Our programs, while we strive to create programs that minimize the gaps so that we feel like we have a program for most students, there are some that we don't feel that we're a good fit for, that we can't meet all of the needs that are in a student's IEP, and that we are not the most appropriate placement for your son or daughter. So that is a possibility. We may come back and say we don't have a good fit. Okay, so those are all of the different outcomes of the application process. So we've talked about what a non-public school is. We've talked about how you get referred to a non-public school and how it gets funded. We've talked about how you apply to our programs and what the possible outcomes of those are. So let's talk a little bit about our specific schools, okay? We have schools on 4 campuses. Sherman Oaks, Van Nuys, Valley Glen, and Culver City. You heard me say a couple of times that we have 15 schools, and you'll notice that there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's only 8 schools on this list. And that's because many of our schools have 2 campuses. So for instance, Village Glen is in Culver City and in Sherman Oaks. So while with the California Department of Education, those are 2 separate schools, I'm going to describe them as one because the programs are pretty much replicated in both locations. Okay, so I'll talk about 8 schools, and remember that they are in more than one location. So the easiest one to talk about is Young Learners. It's the school that I told you that my daughter went to 10 years ago. Can't believe that was 10 years ago. And Young Learners is our preschool. It's our therapeutic preschool. It's our only preschool. So if you have a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old who you feel needs an intensive educational program, but also is looking to build social skills, is looking to build independent living skills, communication skills, then Young Learners is where you're going to apply. It is that you have the least pressure of anybody in this meeting because you know that it is our preschool and you're going to apply to our preschool. Okay, Young Learners has a class size of about 8. The number of adults that are in that class is really dependent upon the student's needs at any given time. Like I said, when I explained all of our programs, you have speech, you have OT, who not only provide service, but inform the classroom so that those occupational therapy and speech therapy constructs inform the classroom so that it's more than just an educational experience, but one that also is intense in its service delivery. Okay. Village Glen is kindergarten through 12th grade. It is in Sherman Oaks and Culver City. It is designed for kids who have social and communication challenges. In the past, they may have had a diagnosis of Asperger's. Since that's not being used as much anymore, they may have a diagnosis of high-functioning autism. However, we are not diagnostically rigid at Village Glen in any way. So your child need not have a medical diagnosis of autism to attend Village Glen. In fact, on the IEP, the eligibility doesn't even need to be AUT as the eligibility. We're just really looking for what does your child bring to the table, and does that match what our program delivers? And that program really is a college preparatory high school program once they get into high school, and preparing kids for high school before then, and kids who graduate from who stay with us long enough to graduate from Village Glen typically do go on to community college or university or a challenging work environment with their high school diploma that meets the A through G requirements necessary to gain admission to a UC or Cal State school if that's the bent of the child graduating. In addition to focusing on a college preparatory curriculum, Village Glen also provides intensive social skills development and has all of the services that I was talking about earlier. So we have OT, speech, counseling that are provided within the day as well as those things are necessary and documented on the IEP. I'll talk about Sunrise next. Also, Sunrise is also in Culver City and in Sherman Oaks. Sunrise is for a group of students who are more significantly impacted cognitively. They typically have primary needs of social communication in general, so many are nonverbal, and are looking to interact with a curriculum that emphasizes skill development and daily living skills and independence, especially as they get older. Kids who go to Sunrise are on the alternative curriculum on their IEP. As they get older and get near graduation age, they graduate with a certificate of completion rather than a diploma. Just real quick, sorry, I did not answer what's the ratio in Valley Glen, and someone just put that in the chat. You meant Village Glen. In Village Glen, there is at least a teacher and an aide in a class, and the biggest the class can get is 14. So at a minimum 1 to 7, it's often less than that when classrooms aren't quite at 14, but that's the max. Okay, back to Sunrise. But sticking on that same topic, the adult to student ratio in Sunrise is more intensive, as you heard the needs there, but really does differ classroom by classroom based upon the unique needs of the students in each class. That's Sunrise. Moving on to Bridgeport. I like to have described Village Glen and Sunrise before I described Bridgeport. Because as you heard, there was a big difference between the cognitive abilities of the students in Village Glen and Sunrise. And to fit, and you know, as students vary along that continuum, there was a big gap there, and Bridgeport sort of sits in the middle and fills that gap. So students at Bridgeport, also kindergarten through 12th, plus we have oh, we have this in Sunrise as well. Sorry, I missed this. We have transition programs in both Sunrise and Bridgeport. So even older than 18 up to the age of 22, we can continue to have those students in our programs as they really at that time really start focusing on those skills that are going to be essential for independence as they enter young adulthood. And Bridgeport is the same. So kindergarten through 12th grade plus a transition program that kids are eligible to remain in through the age of 22. Bridgeport is also in Culver City and Sherman Oaks. And as I said, it sort of sits in the middle of those two populations. So students at Bridgeport are definitely given an academic curriculum, and it is modified. The academic curriculum is modified to meet their needs so that they still are getting exposure to grade level material, but modified to their ability level. And at the same time, they are also working on independent skills and living skills and social skills. So all of those things are happening at one time in the Bridgeport program. Because the curriculum is modified, like at Sunrise, when students get to a graduation age, they do graduate from our programs with a certificate of completion rather than a diploma. So if you're thinking of making if you're trying to distinguish between Bridgeport and Village Glen, Village Glen provides A through G curriculum, meaning they take Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, 2 years of foreign language, 3 years of sciences, and the curriculum is not modified. We may make accommodations like kids have access to from their IEP, like extra time to take a test or preferential seating in a classroom. Those accommodations may be made, but the curriculum is not modified. So therefore they qualify to get a diploma. Whereas at Bridgeport, that is modified. So an example would be, let's say you're reading Moby Dick, and to modify to a child's ability level, the original text is not used. Instead, an abridged text with large writing, with simplified vocabulary is used instead. You have now modified that assignment, and due to that, a child is eligible for a certificate of completion when they complete, rather than a high school diploma. So that would be a big difference between Bridgeport and Sunrise. So let's move on to STEM Cubed Academy. I did see a couple people were interested in that school when you registered. STEM Cubed Academy is located in 2 locations, also in Culver City and then in Valley Glen, which is just up the street from us here in Sherman Oaks, less than 2 miles away, on the same campus at Summit View, which I'll talk about here in a minute. STEM Cubed Academy is our newest school. It came out of our experience in Village Glen of students who otherwise met the criteria for Village Glen, but either had areas of giftedness in math or science, or had really strong interests, or had really strong interests in science, technology, engineering, and math. And so several years ago, we created STEM Cubed Academy for these kids who are average to above average cognitively, have social communication deficits, and have an interest and ability in science and technology and engineering and math. It is a K through 12 program. Obviously, students, it's a rigorous academic program. Obviously, students graduate with a diploma and typically attend 4-year universities when they leave us. The curriculum, there's a maker's lab on campus. So really, if you were to visit STEM, you would really see an environment unlike anything that you'd ever seen, where there's an emphasis really on creativity and design and engineering, with all of the lab space in order to accommodate that. And I think I already said that it's Culver City and Valley Glen. Summit View is in both of those same locations. Summit View is in Culver City and Valley Glen also. Summit View is designed, same question, what's the ratio? Very similar to Village Glen. Again, all of our schools, the greatest number of students that can ever be in a classroom is 14. So they will never go above that. Just got a question, is there a STEM 3 campus in Irvine as well? Unfortunately, it is there right now, but unfortunately we are closing that campus as of the end of this month. So our 2 campuses for STEM are still Culver City and Valley Glen. So Summit View was designed for students with a specific learning disability. That is really the issue that is keeping them from doing well in school. So the student has perhaps dyslexia. The student perhaps has dyscalculia. We conceptualize ADHD as a learning disability. So maybe it's ADHD that's getting in the way. The typical Summit View student does not have other concomitant issues that are getting in the way of their education. So it is really the fact that they are having trouble reading. It is really the fact that they have a math disability that is driving the bus. It is the reason that they need more intensive services than can be provided in their private school. Okay. Summit View also provides a college prep curriculum. Students tend to graduate from Summit View and go on to university. On their websites, you will see the schools that kids go to advertise every year. Lots of kids going to University of Northern Arizona this year. Also, University of Arizona has been a very popular place for them to go, but they go to various schools. They look schools local and across the country as well. Summit View is also kindergarten through 12th grade. We'll go to North Hills Prep now. So the last 2 schools on this list are for students who have more social and emotional challenges. They may still have learning challenges. They may still have social communication challenges as well, but it's really their social emotional issues that are, like I said before, driving the bus in terms of being a barrier for them to access their curriculum. North Hills Prep is in Van Nuys. Kids may have had a history of trauma. Kids may have had a history of acting out in their schools. We really focus not only on providing the academic curriculum, which is an A through G college prep curriculum, but also an intensive therapeutic environment to help them manage those issues so that they can attend to their academics. The program at North Hills Prep is very family focused, trying to involve the family in their child's education and their child's therapy so that we can make the gains that we hope to see as kids get to their graduation age. Westview is in Culver City. Kids at Westview also are dealing with social emotional issues. They are often more internal issues. So depression, anxiety, some ADHD, but those things are significant enough that they've really affected their ability to do well in public school. Westview also has a number of students, and we're very good at working with these students who have had at one time or another have needed to be placed in residential programs, sometimes even out of state. And as they are returning to their homes with their parents, Westview is a nice interim placement between that and maybe going back to their public school. So that's another sort of niche that Westview fields very well. I wanted to talk a little bit, I keep mentioning graduating, and before we move on to questions, I want to talk a little bit about what does success mean when a child comes to one of our schools. I started this off by talking about my own experience with my daughter, and she was with us for 1.5 years, and then she left and went to her public school. That was success because that's what we wanted for her. And other kids come to us in 5th grade and they end up graduating, high school with us. And that was a success because they needed that level of support throughout the process. So I hesitate to ever define success by the number of years that a student is with us. I really want us to define success by, did students meet their goals? Did they receive the support they needed to get to whatever that goal was? If that goal was graduating from high school, then we provided that program for them, and that was success. If the parent thought, you know what, my son's in 9th grade, I really want them to go to prom, and in 2 years I want them to be able to get back to school. As a team, as an IEP team, as a school and parent team, did we provide that level of service to be able to reach that goal? Okay, so your student may be here 1 year or 2. Your student may be here for 7 years. Success may be in either of those different options. So I think that's important. Okay, we have about 9 minutes. I can't believe I've just talked for 51 minutes. And open to any questions that anybody has. I do see one here. STEM school, if you see a child advanced in areas, do I give them advanced curriculum when they're struggling in other stuff? Okay, so absolutely. So the question really is, if you have a student who has significant strength in certain areas and weakness in other, by the way, we expect that. We expect there to be strengths and weaknesses within each child. Neurotypical children have the same profiles often. So yeah, we're going to challenge them in those areas where they have strength. We're going to try it. STEM is really a strengths-based curriculum. So we're really going to try to enhance those strengths and build upon those strengths while also challenging the areas of weakness, seeing what we can do to ameliorate those issues and create a whole child success story. I just answered that for STEM, but as I think about it, that really fits all of our schools. We always want to identify what the children's strengths are, and look at how those strengths may play into the big picture, while also attacking those areas that they need more support with. Next question is, Sunrise, what location? Sunrise is in Culver City and also Sherman Oaks. Young Learners is also in those same two locations. Time of school, it varies, honestly. The schools on the different campuses do not all start at the same time. The range is anywhere between 8:30 to 2:30 to 9 to 3, depending on what schools they are. What percentage of LAUSD students are not approved by IEP teams, or what percentage of LAUSD students are accepted? I wouldn't know that data. What I can tell you is that we have kids who come to us through our admissions process through both routes. So we have kids whose IEP team grants them non-public school funding right through the first IEP where that was ever talked about. We have plenty of kids like that, and we have plenty of kids who have required whose parents have needed to go to mediation in order to get non-public school funding. I don't know the data. Not sure if LAUSD even knows that data, but I don't know that data. But it does happen both ways, and there's a significant number of both that come to us each week, really. Oh, that's something I didn't ever treat in any of the sections, is that we do accept kids all year long. It's rolling admissions from August through June. if the last week in May, it makes sense for your child to come so that they get introduced to school prior to ESY, ESY meaning the extended school year, or maybe colloquially called summer school. We will admit in that last month, in that last 2 weeks of school, if that makes sense for all of us, for you guys, for us, if that makes sense, we will do it. So you can apply anytime during the year for admission to our schools. Are you currently dealing with any capacity issues, or generally if a student is appropriate for one of your schools? There is generally room. We try never to say that we're at capacity. There are some times in which we may, as we're taking in a couple of students at one time, we may need to open a new section, and that may delay your child's start for a period of time, but for the most part, we don't have capacity issues. Would you talk a bit about and by the way, we have about 4 minutes here. Would you talk a bit about the differences and similarities between the STEM 3 Makers Labs of the 2 campuses? Are they identical, or is one bigger than the other? The idea is that we're providing the same quality of education to people no matter which campus they are on. By square footage, maybe the one in Sherman Oaks may be a little bit bigger, but the key components that we are wanting students to have access to are available across our campuses. The main, and I didn't talk about this either, really the main reason why we have replicated our schools on 2 campuses has to do with the contracting districts and where they want to provide transportation to. So if you're going to private pay and you're going to provide your own transportation, then, if for whatever reason you wanted to go to one school versus the other campus, then you would have that latitude. Sometimes parents say, my other child already goes to a private school on that side of the hill, so I want this child to go to your Culver City campus, even though I live in Chatsworth. That would be okay if you were a private pay student. But if you are funded, then we have boundaries, sort of like a school district would. We have boundaries. If you live here, then you need to come to our Culver City campus. If you live here, then you need to come to our Sherman Oaks campus. If those are the 2 places where we offer schools. Sunrise program, does it also accept preschool age kids or only kindergarten age kids? So a Sunrise appropriate child who is preschool aged will be eligible to go to young learners. Then when they finish their four-year-old year, which could be their 2nd year of preschool, their 4-year-old year, when they finish that, then they may be appropriate for Sunrise kindergarten at that point. So young learners is sort of a catch-all for the preschool. So whether you're appropriate for Sunrise or appropriate for Bridgeport, which by the way is harder to tell in a 3 or 4-year-old, then Sunrise is appropriate for you. And then we would make that decision if your child continues to, if you continue to want your child to stay beyond kindergarten, beyond preschool, then we would make that decision about whether your child would advance to Sunrise or to Bridgeport or whatever would be appropriate for that. When might the campus be open for in-person tours? We're talking that at length right now. Hopefully that will happen soon. Like I said, we have done a few evaluations with students that were in person, really making sure that we socially distance and use masks, and hope that folks are vaccinated if they're coming. So there is still maybe that limited option to do that if necessary. And we will certainly let people know as soon as we open up further to do in-person tours. How far do districts fund for transportation? We have kids. We have kids coming from really far distances. You also want to think about the amount of time it takes to get there. But we have kids, El Monte, pretty far east. We have kids south as far as Long Beach. We have kids north up into Ventura County. Simi Valley has a bunch of kids with us. William S. Hart has a bunch of kids with us. So really, districts transport from a pretty. We have kids from ABC Unified out in Cerritos. So kids get transported from a pretty significant amount of time. Can you initiate the enrollment process if the family is still done? Yes, you, and then this will have to be my last question. Can you initiate the enrollment process if the family is still has to undergo the IEP process? Absolutely. That's where, if you were on at the beginning, that's where we will, if we find your child appropriate, then we will give you that letter that says that your child is acceptable but not yet accepted. So we will absolutely do an evaluation to determine a good fit prior to your funding being solidified. Okay. All right. Thank you guys all so much. I hope I answered your questions. Again, if I haven't, you can either reach me directly at jbolton@thehelpgroup.org, or you can email admissions@thehelpgroup.org, and we will do our best to answer every question that you have. I would like to invite, we've been doing webcasts monthly for the last year and a half, and the next one that's coming up on December 1st, I would invite any of you interested to attend or spread the word to your friends. It'll be on the intersection between autism spectrum disorder and LGBTQIA+. All of the webcasts that we've done in the last year and a half are available at thehelpgroup.org/webcast. So feel free to browse through that and see if there's anything that interests you for you to view. Okay, the phone number to our admissions department is there also, 877-943-5747. And we do look forward to hearing more from you, and wish you the best in finding the appropriate placement for your child. Thank you very much.